Alrighty, everybody. Sorry, I am 1 minute late. I decided to throw something on a poll everywhere. I just usually do on paper and pencil, so it always takes longer than you think it's going to. So let me go ahead and get that set up here. Okay. Alrighty, so you go to pollev.com/TarynMyers601. So pollev.com/TarynMyers601. And while y'all are getting there, you can do it from your phone or you can do it from your computer. And while y'all are getting there, I am gonna go ahead and take minutes. See what we got in the chat here. Okay, Allie, you go to, yep, pollev.com and then it's TarynMyers601. Oh, sorry, yeah. Should be available. Let me double check that it's activated. Make sure that you, Allie, you have two letters reversed in my name. It's Taryn. Okay, sweet. All right, so I'll give it just another minute for folks to get logged on. What? What is terrible? Oh, oh, it is. If you started doing it, it's awful. So, yes. So yeah, if you all want to just go ahead and do them once you're signed in, why don't I just give you a few minutes to do that? And then we'll go through the responses and why they are the way they are. Hey, Michaela, we're doing a poll everywhere, so go ahead and get logged on. And then just go ahead and go through them. It was really funny. One time I was teaching this course in the social science lab and a tour came by on this day and we had like this stuff up and we were like, which baby would you say? Like, I was like, oh God, they're never gonna want to come here. This is very cool. I've never left this up before and it actually just shows me y'all's progress. That's really neat. You learn something new every day. Yes, totally agree, Brittany. They are all impossible choices, but force yourself to choose one. It does feel so wrong to pick. I agree, Jade. I'm just gonna make sure. Yep. Missed a couple of people who signed on late, so make sure that I get them. Okay, good. Give everybody credit for the activities today. All right, people are starting to get through here. Man, why did I never know this existed? This is so cool. Just see everybody answering the questions. Yeah, Elliot, wait until we get into the descriptions. This is a very interesting activity. All right, so we've got 2 people still finishing. I'm going to give it a minute for those folks, and then we'll go ahead and discuss. Oh, no. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll just go ahead and give it another minute, and then if you jump on, if you're able to jump on, it'll just show your answers coming up in real time, so. Obviously, the rank order one takes longer because you're not just choosing one of 2 answers. All righty, so we'll go ahead and look at how people responded and kind of talk through each answer here. Okay. So again, awful Sophie's choices, fully acknowledging. You're on a boat that overturns. You have your 5-year-old and your 1-year-old. The boat sinks, so you can only save one. Whom do you choose to save? It was pretty close, but more of you said the 1-year-old. Which again, there's no good answers to these, like ethically, right? So fully acknowledging that. And one thing I should say before we dive in is the context for this. So this was designed by a psychologist named Bernard Weiner. And according to evolutionary psychologists, all organisms, including humans, are just gene producing machines. And so their motivation is going to be, perpetuating their own genetic pool, passing down their genes. So our genes predispose us to act in ways that enhance chances of surviving and spreading. And so that's what the answers, quote unquote, to these are based on. So the idea is people are usually more likely to choose the 5-year-old. Again, y'all defying that, about the same here. Because more, certainly historically, I think it's less true now, but children tended to die more between the ages of 1 and 5. And the idea is that therefore 5-year-olds are more likely to reproduce. So saving the older child would be more likely to perpetuate the gene pool. Again, you all didn't necessarily follow that pattern, not surprisingly. Alrighty, okay, here you did follow the pattern. So a 20-year-old is more likely to reproduce than a 40-year-old. And so the idea is you would save the 20-year-old because they would pass on your genes. I think for some of you, you're probably just thinking more like they got more life to live, things along those lines. Also, like, teach your children to swim. They're 20 and 40, they should know how to swim. That's just my own thing. All right, would you rather marry or have you married someone older or younger than yourself? A lot of people are saying older. So the explanation here, again, I'm just reading. These are not my opinions. Ultimately, it's mating that perpetuates the genetic pool for female reproductive, for the female, I love that it says the female, reproductive capacities are limited to approximately 25 children. Oh, good God, no. For males, respect to the people who do it, but no. For males, reproductive potential is almost limitless because the female's greater investment in each child. She must be careful to select a mate who will help her in child rearing. The male must simply choose females that can bear children. So they say that females should prefer to mate with older males because they will have more resources. You know, again, I think in our modern world that varies greatly. And again, a lot of women have their own resources now. And then males should prefer younger females because they're more likely to give birth. Every single relationship in my extended family, the woman is older than the man. I mean, often not by much, but you know, so we certainly buck this trend. But yeah, I mean, it is fairly common for this pattern, but I think that we've sort of poked holes in that, right, with some of these things. Alrighty, and then in terms of these types of traits, they said that women would be more likely to select the things like good financial prospects, caring and responsible personality, and then that males would be more likely to select items about attractiveness and things along those lines. It looks like everybody was like, whatever with good looks. Y'all are pretty rational people, I think, and you're like, I want someone I'm going to be able to get along with, and like we can support ourselves. And yeah, having someone exciting is pretty good, right? So that you don't get bored with them. Alrighty, so yes, here you are in line with evolutionary psychology. So females have the advantage of knowing any child they bear is definitely theirs. And the idea is the male must determine that the female has really born his child. Again, unless you trust your partner. So the maternal grandparents, the mother of the mother, assured of at least 25% genetic carryover, should be especially happy. Okay, and then this one had like other pairs that I didn't get a chance to put in. So I'll talk through those as well. The greater, so the philosophy here is the greater the investment in the child, and the more likely the child is to reproduce, the greater the experienced negative emotion at death. So greater grief should be experienced by the mother, which is what you all said here. And then another pair, again, I didn't get a chance to put in here, were parents of the father versus parents of the mother. Similarly to the last question, parents of the mother should feel it more. And then older parents who are like less likely to reproduce again. That being said, the loss of any child is absolutely devastating. Feels foreign. It doesn't feel, as a parent, you should outlive your children, right? And so again, I think some of these questions are a little, no, more than a little silly. All right, so then we're thinking about which would elicit more grief. So you all again are sort of about 50-50, and the argument from evolutionary psychology is that it should be the male child because they have more of a capacity to pass along their genes. Again. Yeah, death of a healthy child because again they have more capacity to carry on their genes. I also think death of an unhealthy child, if you know they're unhealthy, right? It's like you have more time to prepare. So I get this response, obviously. And that's the end. So what are people's reactions? This is one of my favorite activities to do because people have really strong reactions. Yes, Elia, child being sick can be super unfair. I totally agree. So folks on Zoom in the chat, folks here in person, what do you think about having to answer those questions and the evolutionary psych answers?
I understood, like I kind of knew there was some kind of what the I didn't want to.
Right. Totally true. Yeah, no. Before I've done these like out loud and people are like, Dr. Myers, I don't want to say. So that's why I thought this might be a little better because people would be totally anonymous, right? But yeah, that's weird to think about. Right? It's not a comfortable thing. Yeah, and Ellie says that any of these could be traumatizing to the family? Absolutely. Again, if you've ever known a family that's lost a child, it's horrific, right? I mean, death in general is often very hard to cope with, but again, just like a personal example here, I don't know if anybody got the chance 2 years ago to watch Cullen, our student who died by suicide, his memorial service. But when his mom went up to his coffin, and I'm gonna swear because she just put her hand on the coffin and said, "What the fuck, kiddo?" It's just like clear that she was having a really hard time processing it, which is understandable, right? And like, we don't know why he made the decisions he did. It made sense to him, right? But it can be so hard as the people left behind to understand any death, right? Yeah, Jaded says, I think my biggest worry was being judged by other people if they could see my answer and I answered differently, because they're hard questions. Yeah, and again, that's one of the reasons why I was like, let's make it anonymous. Because I used to have people to raise their hands and I think people felt like really uncomfortable doing that. So and then Allie says, it's interesting to think about who might grieve things more. It's a hard question to think about. Yeah. And I think one of the things this doesn't take into account, right, is the idea that different people have different personalities, right? And thus might express their emotions more or less, or experience it in different ways. Yeah, who would care more if one of us, I mean, that's like really interesting to think about. I know one of the things I had to do, I want to say it was like 8th grade health class, is they made us write our own obituary. Like, that's really interesting to do, right? To think about, like, what would you want to leave behind? What would you want people to remember about you? Yeah, and thinking about like who would actually mourn you. And oftentimes I think more people than we think, right? So when I was in high school, I was one of those dance mom kids. I think I might have mentioned this in passing before. And my dance teacher passed away very suddenly. Like, she had a blood clot in her leg that traveled to her heart. They had no idea. She just like didn't wake up one morning. And her funeral procession was the longest I've ever seen. It was like 5 miles long. When there were like police everywhere to monitor, because she was just so well loved, and it was like all of her current and former students who came out. Yeah, if you were raised by your dad, but you had a difficult relationship with your mom, yeah, that's a really important thing too. Like, what are the parents' relationships with their children, right? How much are they involved in their lives? And again, all of this in evolutionary psych, which I've mentioned previously, sort of ignores the fact that like, there are single moms now, there are single dads, there are stay-at-home dads, right? And so it doesn't necessarily take into account the nuances of what actually happens now. So what I am gonna do now, we have another activity that's kind of fun. I don't have, we'll just do. All right, give me just a sec. I could not find this on my computer to like copy and paste it. I don't know what happened to it. I clearly have it, right? But let's go old school, and I will just sort of type some of these out real quick. So what you're going to be doing, and for folks in class, we'll have to do 1 set of 3, but other people will be paired up, and I'll pair you up in Zoom breakout rooms. So let me go ahead and share screen real quick. I am going to put up a list of a whole bunch of things. Throw up a new Google Doc here. And you are going to just talk with the person and see what you have in common and what you don't. So you're just going to talk about like what your favorites are in each of those things. No one reads the newspaper anymore. Some of these are dated. I mean, I read the online newspaper. I'll end with that one. All right, so let me go ahead and actually give this a name. A like or different. And I will leave this up on the board, up on the screen for folks who are in here. I'm gonna go ahead and put it as a link in the chat for folks on Zoom. And then what you're gonna do when you pair up, and again, in here, we'll have to do 1, 3 and 1, 2, is you guys are gonna look at this list together and say like, what are your politics? What is your favorite music? Things like that. And just sort of notice how many you are alike on. And kind of keep a tally for yourselves. And there's a purpose to this, I promise, it relates. So let me go ahead and throw that link. Oh, I already did in the chat. So I'm gonna go ahead and make my breakout rooms, and then folks here in person, go ahead and wiggle around, so you can get paired or threed up. So. All right, so everybody will have someone they're paired up with in the breakout rooms. Make sure you grab that Google Doc so that you have access to this list. And I'll bring y'all back in a few minutes. And make this legible for y'all in here. And I might need to do 150. There we go.
We need to do this on. We need to do this on a Google Doc.
No, you're just gonna talk through them and then just keep a tally of how many you're similar on. General, liberal, conservative. Are you gonna vote tomorrow? Vote tomorrow, everybody. If you haven't already.
Yeah.
Not very late.
I grew up in a Christian question. Bring in the good friend. Probably. Little women.
Well, like athletics now, I guess.
Yeah.
That's what that's on me. So.
I'm hoping for it to
Me too.
Sorry, I'm just gonna move this real quick so I can find it next year.
It was Netflix event, and YouTube.
Yeah.
And it's TikTok or Snapchat.
I don't have TikTok. I use Snapchat a lot.
Yeah.
He's read it a lot. I think he's kind of, but I use it. Yeah, I'll go to Snapchat.
I was on TikTok. Like 40 minutes,
Scroll,
not even.
scroll.
Yeah. But I don't watch TV, so it's like makes it. I wanna work in a hospital.
Coaching or. Something like that with the freshman area or something.
And
Bring in that things like house.
I mean, they can serve and finish.
Skimboard. Yeah, that's pretty nice.
Yeah.
Water. Very enjoyable.
I would go to.
It's really gross. That's, just like dolls, cat here and there.
I like going on with friends and beach and stuff.
It's like and like science related, like biology, that kind of stuff.
I wish that my own, I like an happy video.
Yeah, I like biology in principle, I don't like actually taking on biology classes. So,
I'm pretty good at this. Nine,
but it's- So usually that is what's subject.
Good question. We'll just get rid of that one because it's redundant. Doop.
Not gonna have it on. Bad one. I'm always going out doing something on my body, I'm always trying to see buildings.
So. I got nothing to do. I'm just.
I'm always like have to do something for some reason, my brain does not want to allow.
Good pasta.
I like pasta ground. I like my French wings, I love
Bacon and
chicken. Supposed to get sushi last night, but I got roast chicken instead. I'm doing it very first session.
Not on it.
I go to all you can eat every time.
Oh, yeah.
You go there and make sure I'm hungry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But like anything that just like doesn't want. I like the special like drop of that shit. I don't know.
I wish for like
Oh, okay.
Dateline, like stuff like that.
Big enough, but you know, I can agree.
I can watch everything.
I don't know, like, I don't like. I can never watch The Office. I like to see what the story goes, but I don't know, like, what's maybe on for driving.
I watched a couple episodes ago. When they look good, when that's and why.
Doesn't have like me hang on it.
I watched a Christmas, they made like Christmas vacation or family, weekend, biggest. But yeah, there was no like walk or anything, like one before and
Oh.
When the was happy.
All right, I'm gonna give folks like just a couple more minutes, whenever you get to your stopping point, count out how many things you were similar on. Alrighty, I'm gonna bring back our breakout room, folks, and then we can chat through this. Alrighty, welcome back, breakout room folks. So what I'd like you to do, and the groups in here, if you haven't gotten a chance to do it, is take a minute and count up how many things you were similar on with your partner. And then if people on Zoom don't mind putting the number you were similar on in the chat, so just like 10, you know, if you, and then folks in here, how many were you similar on? Okay. All right, so one group here, 11, and then how about y'all? How many? 8, yeah. So 9 or 10, 11, 8. All right, see what everybody else got. 15, wow. We got through about 7, most of the similar, we were 7, yeah, I mean, it depends on how much you chat about them, right? When you get through, that I wanted us to be able to talk about them. So yeah, it looks like people are finding a lot of really cool similarities. So let me show you, you're like, Dr. Myers, what was this about? It was a little absurd. Well, when you when you look at articles about identical twins who are separated at birth, a lot of times they'll talk about how similar they were when they met up with each other. So this one might not talk about that. I'm gonna try and find. There was one that I remember very clearly from when I was younger. This might not even load, where it was like they were both wearing things on their wristbands. They were both wearing things along those lines. Okay, this might be it. We're both wearing a beaded dress in our senior prom, and our hair was exactly the same. Things along those lines. And so the reason we do this activity is that you'll find that people will look for these similarities and be like, oh, it must be genetic that we both chose beaded dresses, and in the same year that we went to prom, we both wore our hair in the same trendy way. Right, but here you are. I'm assuming no one in here is actually related to anybody else in the class, and y'all were finding lots of similarities, right? So while these things are cool, I think that a lot of people want to say they are like, oh, they're separated at birth because this is all genetic. And it's just like people have stuff in common, right? That doesn't make those stories less cool. It's just something to keep in mind that we do have. I mean, as people, we have things that we're similar with other people about. We're not going to get into an extensive discussion of the readings like we typically would, just because I think these activities illustrate it a lot better. But I did want to pull up the reading PowerPoint here, just so y'all could see what the authors of the readings we did today look like. For the twins, couldn't it be they look the same? So they figure, yeah, that's a really good point, Brittany, that like they look the same, good in the same hair and clothes. Yeah, that totally makes sense. All right, so this is David Buss. He's an evolutionary psychologist. He studies strategies of human mating. And then these are Alice Eagley and Wendy Wood. Alex Eagley is a psychologist who studies gender and sexuality, does meta-analyses looking at how similar people are by gender instead of how different. And then Wood studies that, but she also studies habits that people have as well. Steven Pinker, he's just like stereotypical like scientist guy, love the hair. So he studies both evolutionary psych and language. I really like his My Genome Myself, right? It kind of is an interesting way to think about things. And then I gotta give a shout out to Ruth Howard. She was the first African American woman to get a PhD in psychology. And she studied cultural diversity and really focused on respect for all people. And I just thought her triplet study was so cool and innovative. I mean, like now people don't study triplets that much, and we have much easier methods to track people down for studies. So very cool. There is one thing I did want to talk about, and let me see if I can find the article real quick. There we go. That's what I was looking for. All right. So does anyone not know who Jeffrey Epstein is? So just quick refresher, he's a total crime bag. He was involved in sex trafficking of women and sort of provided very powerful people, including several former presidents and one of the princes of the UK, with access to these women largely against their will. And I thought that this was really interesting, that Epstein loved evolutionary psychology. Oh, and this is in past tense because when he was arrested, he died in his cell. Some people say it was death by suicide. Some people say it was like too suspicious. So putting that out there. But essentially, one of the things that they talk about here is that Epstein really hung out with some of these people like Steven Pinker, who we did a reading from today. So for example, Pinker has described men as biologically predisposed to aggression, violent competition over women, and even rape. Other evolutionary psychologists have written about sexual selection, male-male competition, and mate choice. And then Robert Trivers, who we didn't read, but he talks about social biology, evolutionary psych, and altruism, reciprocal exchanges, but also things like adultery and things along those lines. And so Epstein liked their work because to him it kind of justified what he was doing. Now, does that mean all of evolutionary psychology is awful? No. But I think it's really interesting to think about how our theories and the works of people who are often pretty respected in their field, who their words can get twisted, or sometimes they're very consciously supporting them. So for example, Pinker has been at some pains to distance himself from Epstein since the billionaire was rearrested in July of whatever year this was. Says that he always found Epstein tedious and distasteful, but he submitted analysis of the wording of the Internet Luring Statute, a federal law which criminalized using the internet to communicate with minors in order to entice them across state lines for the purposes of sexual exploitation. So essentially, he helped in Epstein's case by using his knowledge of language and evolutionary psych, sort of, I would argue, for evil, right? He would sort of argue it's an intellectual activity, probably. So again, doesn't mean evolutionary psych is itself awful, just means it's something we should always keep in mind when we're learning psychological theories, is how are they used and misused, right? And what can be said about things, and do we need to be wary? So just wanted to see y'all's reactions to that. The idea that, you know, people can take psychological theories and twist them or use them for these nefarious purposes, or that well-respected psychologists can get roped into things that they probably shouldn't be supporting. And again, folks on Zoom, feel free to talk about it in the chat as well. Because some of this happened with Freud too, right? Some of the applications of Freud's work went well beyond what he ever argued. And even like basic evolutionary theory. The dress I'm wearing today has Darwin's tree of life on it. This is when Darwin first tried to figure out how evolution worked. But like Darwin's cousin Galton was the one, Galton, maybe, but was the one that was like survival of the fittest among humans. Like Darwin himself didn't really talk about it in those terms, right? So people can take your theories and twist them. I know, it's a pretty heavy question for 10 in the morning. Let me reorient the question this way. So, do you think psychologists have an obligation, if they're still alive, obviously, to make sure their theories are not misused? Or do you think that's totally out of their control? Yeah, I think you might be right. Yeah, Griffin.
So, probably goes, I think a general trait, I guess, of psychologists kind of being like open for interpretation, and I think that just kind of goes along with it.
Yeah, I think you guys might be right that unfortunately, you know, this can happen. And the Dali is saying they should, because they're the ones who put the theories into the world. And I think a lot of psychologists who find their work has been misused do try to correct, but yeah, it can get out of your control. Alrighty, so we'll wrap up there for today. Couple quick announcements. Your exam is due Friday, both pieces of it. So make sure you're working on it. I will be here. If no one comes in, I'll probably just be in my office. On Wednesday for questions. So the test is Wednesday, so you can come in to ask questions, or you can have it as your day to work on the test. Probably right after this class or sometime between now and Wednesday, I'm gonna send out a survey that I want you all to fill out for our simulation, because we're gonna start that stuff on Friday. So the survey will just help me assign you roles. It's how comfortable you are, like having a bigger role, things along those lines. So it'll probably take you 30 seconds to a minute to fill out. So take some time to do that. Alrighty, I'll hang around for a couple minutes in case anyone has questions. If not, I know I'll see some of you in class a little later today, but other of you I will see on Friday.